Shall we talk D&D? I have here the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, and I've been sifting through it at great length, ready to prep a little video for us to try and pick it apart and come at it from a perspective, because I'd like to talk about why I think this is actually a pretty good resource if you're new to the world of D&D and DMing in general. Dungeon Master's Guide had loads of advice, but let's face it, as a newcomer, it could be pretty overwhelming and a lot to take in at the best of times. This guide seems to tackle that issue head first. It had a step-by-step approach to help beginners build their campaign, manage their games, and in turn feel a lot more confident at that table. In the very first chapter of this book, it starts by explaining how to start your journey as a Dungeon Master, and it is packed full of advice. Let me give you an example. The Dungeon Master's role is to create the world your players explore and bring that world to life through stories, challenges, and opportunities for them to shape that world in return. Instead of starting straight off the bat with these really complex world-building tips, it focuses on helping you build a relationship between that world and your players. And this for me is huge for those just starting out. It makes the role of the DM feel much more like a collaborative role rather than that daunting solitary task of just controlling everything, even though that might be for you. What I really love though is the NPC creation section. If you're new to the world of DMing, creating NPCs can be quite an intimidating task. This edition has ready-to-use, streamlined NPCs that come with really quick motivations and even character hooks. Let's just find it quickly. A well-crafted NPC can shape the adventure. They might become a trusted ally, a devious villain, or a long-lost friend at the party. This direct, lore-driven approach means you can quite literally pick up the book, turn to a page and have an NPC ready to go within minutes, whether that's going to be a mage offering very cryptic advice, or maybe a merchant trying to sell you cursed items. Those little touches make your world as the DM feel much more alive and dynamic. Another exciting addition is the revised magic item rules. For such a long time, players and DMs have struggled to balance those magic items, especially since some have the power to completely unbalance the game. And there are quite clear guidelines in here for distributing and balancing those powerful artifacts. For example, a magic item's rarity is not just about power. It reflects a place in the world. A legendary item can be a cultural relic in one realm and a feared artifact in another. I feel like this change makes magic items feel a lot more meaningful in the context of your campaign and your world that you're building. They aren't just items with numerical bonuses, but they actually come with cultural significance now and lore that can drive plot points, for example. I think it's a fantastic move for world building, especially for new DMs who might not have got around to considering the deeper connections that these items can have within their stories. So what about encounters? The 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide has actually now introduced more accessible methods for designing balanced encounters. In the past, encounter difficulty was quite a complicated process that involved a lot of maths and what I felt like was constant adjustments. Now, new DMs have access to clearer guidelines to create these challenges that are not just combat focused but also narratively driven. It reads that encounters aren't always about fighting. They can be about problem solving, intrigue, or moral dilemmas. I feel like this shift allows DMs to sort of revise a much wider variety of encounters, from intense diplomatic discussions to creative environmental challenges and maybe even more sort of moral choices. For new DMs, I think this approach gives you a lot more flexibility, and it kind of ensures that your players are never stuck in that sort of combat-only loop system that we often fall into a lot of during campaigns. It wouldn't be a discussion, would it, without addressing the elephant in the room. While it has plenty of innovations, it has also gotten a lot of pushback, particularly from long-term DMs, people that have been in this game much longer than myself. And I've read concerns that this is much too simplified in some areas. I've seen people comment that there's less emphasis on that player agency, and the much less rigid world building has left some people feeling that there's less room for that sort of very deep, complex storytelling that D&D was obviously built on. For example, this new guide actually encourages players to adapt the world to their decisions. And it reads, your world should adapt to the decisions that your players make and not the other way around. And while this is a great approach for empowering players, I have seen some veteran DMs saying that it undermines the richness of a world that has already been meticulously crafted. Those hours that you spend after your working day into the early hours of the morning, putting all of your sort of visions in order for it to come to life. Some people are saying that this guide sort of ends up taking those efforts away from you as a DM. The old Dungeon Master's Guide definitely encouraged a lot greater world building complexity, but this new approach is a lot more streamlined to make it more accessible and player focused, and we kind of end up now with players of D&D on two sides of a fence, sort of like where do you sit and where do you find yourself when it comes to approaching world building and being a DM. The shift in philosophy has been met with quite mixed reactions, I've found, from the community. On the one hand, it definitely gives DMs a lot more freedom to focus on player choices and make it a lot more player focused and definitely more streamlined. I know I've used that word a lot, but it's definitely a common theme as you read through. And on the other hand, you have what feels like, for more experienced DMs, a step back from that, a lot more intricate lore-based storytelling that they're very accustomed to. And it has, I've seen anyway, it has somewhat divided the community, which is a given in most hobbies, isn't it? There's always going to be a difference of opinions, but this one has thrown a little bit of a spanner in the works. Of course, I'm not going to just brush over the criticism with Hasbro and all of that, but that's not what I'm here for really today. In this video, I know that a lot of fans and a lot of players of D&D are very frustrated, and I don't want to ignore that, but I also didn't really want it to be the focus. I did want to just pull out the positives of this, particularly if you're coming at it as a new player. It does feel frustrating when that company behind a game that you love so much, it feels like sometimes they are, prioritizing profits over their community, and putting all that to one side, taking out of this the positive aspects and for what it is. It's clear that the Wizards of the Coast have made a very conscious effort to make D&D feel more inclusive and more accessible and more welcoming to new players. It's difficult because it's a very daunting game for a newbie, and it is one of those ones, the more you play, the more involved you are, it's much more easier to access, and this does make it 10 times easier than what it was before, so credit to them for that. Not ignoring the fact the corporate decisions have been somewhat messy, but I do believe that the content here is designed with the player particularly and the DM in mind, especially those just starting out on their journey. Although it might not be perfect for the very seasoned DMs, it is an incredibly solid resource for anybody new to the game. It is definitely packed with the tools for a very fun, engaging, world-building experience, and yes, it is simplified in some areas, but for newcomers it's absolutely what you need and are very grateful for, I think. But how do you feel about it? How do you feel about these changes? What side of the fence are you sat on? Is it something that piques your interest, or are you definitely one of those of the opinion that where you're like, no, it's not for me, I'm not even going to give it the time of day? I will show you, just before I end this little YouTube video, there are some fantastic, there's some love, the brilliant, okay, Christ ADHD, thank you so much. There are some great maps available within here. Difficult one. As always, I appreciate your comments, I appreciate you being here. If you stuck with me this far, please do all of those things that I need to nag you to do to support my tiny channel, and I'll see you in the next video.